Okay, first review of the week is going to be Apocalypse, Various Systems of the Apocalypse, book number 2, written by Macronomicon. It is 418 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. After Jebediah Trapper completed the impossible tutorial by cheating, the vet's been in something of a slump, his PTSD gradually guiding him down the path of self-harm. Crippled, stripped of his powers, and homeless, he's got no reason to keep breathing until a little girl is in trouble. That is a super vague but accurate description of like maybe the first 10% of the story. It essentially is the introduction without getting into any of the cool stuff that's happening in this story. The first book in the series I absolutely thought was great. It was essentially RPG Apocalypse, where everybody was transported to this tutorial, and they could choose like the level of difficulty. With the greater the level, more chances that they're going to die, but also better rewards. And the main character accidentally choosing impossible. So it was the hardest mode. And essentially, they have an adventure there. Not to spoil things for you if you haven't read the series. But in book 2 in the series, in the follow-up, all that's over. All that's finished. The main character is suffering the consequences of the end of that series. That first book where the gods have stripped away the system from him. That's not too spoilery. But it is kind of a big thing in that there is slightly less RPG stuff in the second book in the series. Eventually that's modified a little bit in that he gets a way to kind of peek at things like admin descriptions or his personal descriptions. But the way that he progresses is no longer based upon just getting experience points for killing stuff. There's a deeper level of magic and magical theorizing that he gets involved with. There is still progression, but again, it isn't as frequent as the first book, which wasn't like super, cringe in the first place. So there is still RPG progression in the story. It is not as, again, frequent as other stories, but that doesn't make the story any less entertaining. There's a lot of other things that definitely make up for this. It's still, there's tons of action from start to finish. It's a highly entertaining story. I see that even though the story is a little bit slice of life still, and that you're following the main character doing stuff in this new fantasy-esque world, which I'll get into in a second. It's a little more structured, and that you can see that there's a bunch of things that are set up in the beginning of the story that pan out and play out towards the end, and there's follow-through and rewards. So you can see the second book is definitely a little more structured than just simply being slice of life. So, but the story is still a very fun pacing, and you get to follow this main character as he tries to figure out his place in this world, or humanity is. The survivors of humanity, I should say, have been transported along with portions of Earth and stitched into this fantasy RPG world. So the story itself kind of has this vibe of fantasy RPG with like fantasy RPG with a little bit of an RPG apocalypse tied into it. And that's mostly because the main character in the story goes scavenging for parts and materials and monsters and places, and there's a bunch of crafting there and survivalist kind of stuff when they go towards the unoccupied sections of where Earth was stitched in this world. And so there's a lot of different mixes here, but it's all very, very entertaining. I had a really good time with this. I actually had a great time. But again, like I think the biggest shift as far as game mechanics is going to be the fact that it's a fairy system. That's why it's titled that way. It's a progression system that is tied into like fairy mythology, and I thought it was really nicely done, and that it added instead of just like stripping away the RPG system, like sucks for you, you're not going to do anything because the author doesn't feel like dealing with the numbers. It's the author layered in a new system that matched perfectly with what existed, and added like this almost secret hidden lore about what's really happening with this system and how to kind of exploit it a little bit in different ways. And without getting too spoilery, I thought it was really nicely done. I was like, oh, this is adding a nice bit of world building in addition to creating a specific progression system for the main character and a few select others. So really nice stuff there. On the story side of things, again, it really is mostly slice of life with like some interesting arcing connections throughout the thing. But again, this is a serial story that's written online, and once it gets to a certain length, it kind of just cut off to a degree and then published. So you can still find like the continuing serial story online if you want to go read ahead a little bit before this is ready for publishing. But it's highly entertaining, lots of good action, adventure, good stuff. You get a few returning some characters from book number 1, but it's mostly just the main character and his fairy companion, which I really liked because it gave the story an opportunity to kind of delve into their characters a little bit more. I liked the way that the PTSD was handled, in that it felt realistic, but also just like a motivational factor for what the main character needs to do to survive. And it was kind of an exploration of his backstory and his character that made him feel really fleshed out. And I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. But again, because it is a smaller story and that mostly just these two main characters, it gave them an opportunity to see their experiences, their sense of humors, their thoughts and viewpoints and having them being placed in this alien civilization. So it was kind of fun and interesting, even when it was just talking or exploring backstory. So really good stuff. I thought the story was great. I birthed this in a couple sittings, and it's not a small story. It's over 418 pages. So that tells you how much I enjoy it. So for me, it gets a score of 8 out of 10. That's a great review score. That's Apocalypse, Fairy System of the Apocalypse, book number 2, with a score of 8 out of 10. I thought it was great.